The oldest and strongest human emotion is fear, and the oldest and strongest type of fear is trepidation of the unknown. When we were children, our parents told us that monsters didn't exist, but we were sure that something was lurking under the bed or in the closet. Fear sees, even if our eyes are closed. Welcome to the realm of the Arcane. My name is Lon Strickler. Join me as I examine unexplained creatures, strange manifestations, and remarkable realities. Imagine this next hour as a voyage of discovery to strange lands, seeking not for new territory, but for new knowledge of the supernatural. Come on board as we begin this adventure together. Hey folks, good evening and welcome to another episode of Arcane Radio. I'm your host, Lon Strickler, and I thank you for joining me here on the Paranormal King Radio Network. Now, before I introduce my guest, I'd like to present an account that I recently forwarded to me. I received a telephone call from an eyewitness who I'll refer to as DH, who encountered a winged humanoid during the summer of 2011. Now, DH had recently come across the Chicago area winged humanoid post and subsequent reports that I had received in 2017 and 18. Now, this was the first time that DH had been aware of these sightings. This is why DH contacted me directly in order to report his experience from 2011. Now, DH and his companion were driving south on I-35 after leaving the Black Bear Casino on their way back to Moose Lake, Minnesota. It was a clear moonlit night, approximately 2 a.m. DW was driving a sports car. DH was driving a sports car. Now, as he was driving, he observed a large winged being quickly descending from the sky in front of them. They first saw it drop straight down with wings horizontal and open. It was at least 1 mile away in what DH estimates at 2,000 to 3,000 foot altitude. It literally looked like a human with wide bat-like wings that spanned across both freeway lanes. The being glided towards the car as it was going to collide with the windshield. In fact, DH's companion coiled expecting an impact. Now, DH braced himself for a collision, but suddenly the winged being flew over the vehicle. Both occupants were extremely shaken to the point where DH pulled over onto the shoulder. Now, DH stated that the being was dark brown in color with a shiny, wet-like appearance. The wings were leather-like and quite large. The body was 5 to 6 foot in length and thin, with a narrow head that had pointed ears. The eyes were hollow and dark. The being never flapped or moved its wings, as if it had another means of propulsion. Now, DH never reported the encounter and felt that no one ever believed him. He felt comfortable relaying the encounter to me after reading about the Chicago incidents. Now, after I had posted this account, he sent me a follow-up in his own words. He said that we both noticed and saw what looked like a wide, somewhat glossy object drop straight down super fast like a spider would when it drops from a vertical web line to lower itself. As it dropped and stopped suddenly just feet above the horizon, as to then instantly proceed to glide towards my low-profile sports car at what I estimate was the same speed I was heading towards it. So we were heading toward each other, each now at about 140 miles an hour. I saw it in my high beams as it headed directly toward my car's windshield. I waited till it appeared imminent it was going to collide with my windshield, which was about 20 foot in my guess. My view of the wings, face, shoulder were brief but amazing before I ducked sideways while trying to maintain control of the car. The lower part of my body just went numb, with the lower torso goosebumps in a way that I have never experienced. This creature defied physics as it dropped straight down, not an angled glide. It is as if the air went right through its wings, and it did appear to drop faster than gravity could pull any object down. Its bat-like wings nearly spanned the 2 freeway lanes. It made no sense to us then or now. So now DH is a well-known, respected professional in the entertainment industry. So I truly believe that this report is consistent with some of the other inquiries my associates and I have received concerning these winged humanoids. So let's get started with tonight's show. Tonight's guest is Jason Offutt, who's a journalist, author, and anomalist. Jason grew up on a farm near a little town of Offutt, Missouri. In his life, he has been a farmhand, journalist, photographer, bartender, and the mayor of the same small town. Jason now teaches journalism at Northwest Missouri State University in Maryville. He has written many books, including Darkness Walks the Shadow People Among Us, Haunted Missouri, A Ghostly Guide to the Show Me State's Most Spirited Spots, and Paranormal Missouri, Show Me Your Monsters. His upcoming book is titled Chasing American Monsters. You can find his website at jasonoffutt.com. So, Jason, thanks for joining me.
Hey, Lon, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Now, you and I have not talked for a while. It's quite a long time. First of all, how did you become interested in strange and unusual?
Well, I've always been interested in that. Growing up, I was, when I was like 4 or 5 years old, I didn't watch, like Sesame Street or Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood because reruns of Lost in Space were on at that time. Yeah, and the original Star Trek, and that's what I was glued to. And when I was in elementary school, whenever the Scholastic Book Club order form came by, I was checking books on the Loch Ness Monster and Bigfoot. That's what I wanted to read about. When I was, how old was I? I was 6 or 7. I've always read newspapers. I was a journalist for 17 years, and when I was little, I was always still a newspaper geek. Even at a young age. That's when the Momo encounters were happening over on the eastern side of Missouri. Mm-hmm. And I followed those. I was just fascinated because we had Bigfoot encounters in my home state, and it was in the newspaper, so it's got to be real, right? Mm-hmm. Right. So, yeah, I'd like take a backpack with sandwiches and, flashlight and stuff like that out into the cornfields around the house and look for Bigfoot footprints, and drove my mom crazy. But, I've been interested in all sorts of creepy crawlies and ghosts since I was pretty little.
It's pretty interesting how we get involved with this stuff. For me, it was like, I think it was around 9 or 10 when I first heard about the Betty and Barney abduction, Betty and Barney Hill abduction in New Hampshire. And that just mesmerized me. Mm-hmm. It was just before the Apollo 11 moon landing. So anything like that just fascinated the heck out of me. And of course, wasn't long after that when the In Search of TV shows started coming on television. So, it was like, wow, we're getting hit with all this weird stuff all of a sudden.
Yeah, I was glued to that. That was one of my favorite shows, and it's still, they're all on YouTube, and I'll still look them up every once in a while just to check them out, and they still hold up to me. I also watched Kolchak the Night Stalker. Oh yeah, as a kid, that was absolutely terrific.
Which is funny because we did this investigation of these Chicago flying humanoids back in starting in early 2017. And boy, I started getting the Kolchak references like crazy out of that city.
Yeah, that's a compliment. That's a compliment. Yeah, and because I followed that. I followed your work on that, and all I could really think about was, these things happen every once in a while, and it started in like 2017 and they were big in 2018, and then they sort of started to peter out, and there's probably not going to be many more after this. At least, that's what I'm thinking, because that's how the waves usually go. Mm-hmm. And it was making me think of John Keel's Window Areas. Mm-hmm. Yeah, whenever a lot of strange activity happens in one place for a period of time, and then all of a sudden here it is, and then all of a sudden it kind of stops. that makes a whole lot of sense to me, that there are areas that are a little bit, on this planet that are a little bit thinner than the other ones, and things leak through it from time to time.
Yeah, it seems that way. And that's kind of where we're going at with this, though. We may never be able to figure out what this was, but some of the descriptions of some of the things that people described to us made me believe that these things were not indigenous and they were coming from somewhere else. So,
well, right. I mean, because there are, going back to the similar things, the Mothman, that it just started, and then when something happened, it stopped.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't around a lot, and we have so many stories of window areas that we've the green children that appeared in England. That was, could have been a window area. There was a case of a man who appeared in Japan, who had a passport from a country that didn't exist and had money on him from a country that didn't exist, and looked like he was from a different dimension. Well, I mean, that could have been a window area at that point where he just stepped through.
So your upcoming book is titled Chasing American Monsters. Would you say that the monster cryptid hunting and investigation is a nationwide obsession?
Oh, not really. I think it's more of a worldwide obsession.
You think so?
Yeah, people all over the world are, search for these things. I don't know on a basis as in much of the United States, because this is where I live, but I know there are a lot of cryptid hunters out there. I've followed Adam Davies' work for quite a while. I mean, heck, Sir Edmund Hillary went looking for the Yeti back in the day. So, I mean, there are people worldwide who are interested in this, but in the United States, it seems to be, that's where we have people on the weekends going and going out in the woods and knocking on trees.
Yeah, it does seem to me, though, maybe more recently, or recent years, that cryptozoology is more of a North American phenomenon. Now, of course, there are well-known cryptids throughout the world, and you name some, and of course, like, Loch Ness Monster and stuff. But, our continent seems to capture a majority of the enthusiasm.
Right. Well, one of the things I think about that in researching the book, a lot of monsters that we've experienced here are monsters that originated in Europe or Japan or someplace else. Like the Tommyknockers of Pennsylvania and California, where am I going? The Banshee of South Dakota, the Black Dog of Connecticut. All of these have roots in foreign countries, and that's because this country's filled with people who came here from someplace else.
Right.
And when they immigrated here, they didn't just bring a change of clothes and grandma's recipe book and maybe some family heirlooms. They brought all their legends and stories, and their monsters came with them.
Well, that's true, because this part of the country was heavy German descendants, and you are immigrants. You had, of course, people seeing lots of upright canines, werewolves in southern Pennsylvania and throughout Maryland. Of course, the snallygaster, which is another cryptid that you mentioned in the book, that was well documented in Frederick County in Maryland as well. So a lot of these immigrants from the old country, they were kind of seeing the same thing they saw or was part of the legend when they were back home.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like I'd mentioned the Tommyknockers. Some of the best miners in the world were from Cornwall, England. And when all this coal was discovered in Pennsylvania, companies would bring over Cornish miners because they were the best. Well, the Cornish miners had stories of the Tommyknockers, which were diminutive people who would mine. They would mine as well, but they would also play pranks on the miners. Hiding a tool, hiding their lunch. They would be also be known to sometimes warn people there was a possible cave in. Other times they would be known to lure people deeper into the mine right before a cave in, so that these miners would die as well. And when the Cornish miners were brought over to the United States, these stories came with them, and the American miners who were mining with them started experiencing the same thing. So, I mean, either the Tommyknockers came over with the Cornish miners, or something I've been thinking of a lot is that there are entities. There are probably entities out there that emulate other entities. So it might not be the Tommyknockers from England who were over here. It's whatever entities latched onto the Cornish miners that were emulating those stories.
Or it could be like a thought form manifestation,
like a Tulpa.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's one thing I had thought about as well. That people that had come over from another country and they started experiencing the same thing may have, seen or felt phenomena and just associated somehow with something that they were familiar with, and somehow created a tulpa.
Well, and that absolutely, definitely a possibility. That I've placed that sort of thing along with the Black-Eyed Kids, because journalist Brian Bethel is the first one to talk online about the Black-Eyed Kids, and this was back in '98 or '99, I think. And when people caught wind of it, the discussion went crazy, and all of a sudden, people were seeing Black-Eyed Kids all over the place. Slender Man, which is a completely made-up entity, it was fabricated. People started reporting that they had actually seen it.
Right.
So, I mean, yeah, is the human mind, when it gets fixated on something, when it puts a lot of energy into thinking about a subject, does that subject come to life?
Well, I believe in that. I think that may very well be true. And, you mentioned the Slender Man. I think that, the increase of memes, or these entity encounters of memes, maybe something that is going to become a bigger part of paranormal investigation. Now, are people creating thought forms because of their own line all the time, and they see these made up entities? Will they be manifested because of something someone would think out as almost like what a poltergeist is?
Right. Because I think human thought has a lot of power. There was the character John Constantine. That was it was turned into a film with Keanu Reeves. I don't remember what year, but the writer of Constantine, Alan Moore maybe. He had told a story that he was sitting in a coffee shop, and a person who, it was Constantine. It was the character that he created, the character that he had written. He'd conjured this fictional character in his head. He said that this guy walked past him in a coffee shop, ordered a cup of coffee, and when he was leaving, turned around and looked him right in the eye and nodded and walked out the door. Was that just a coincidence? A guy who looked just like the character that he created? Or did he actually create something physical? I think that sort of thing's possible, because whenever we start thinking about things a lot, sometimes they kind of happen.
Yeah, that's true. And, I do run across a case here and there, but, they've closely resembles the possibility of it being a thought form. I mean, it's just something that manifests for some unknown reason. And of course, the human that's manifesting has no idea that they're doing it. And it just becomes bigger than life, apparently. But it's a lot of it does happen, I think.
Right. I did. But let me go, because I am right. At my base, I'm a skeptical person, because I want science to prove things. I'm not going to say I believe in Bigfoot, because I want science to show me the body. Do I think it's possible Bigfoot exists? Of all the cryptids, I think that one's one of the, the most ones, there's the most evidence showing, yeah, it probably does. But still, I want to see the evidence before I say 100% that's what I'm sure of. So, I mean, there are also things that the human mind does, like, for example, my wife and I 2 years ago bought a Ford Escape. And, frankly, I never could remember seeing what a Ford Escape was. We went to the lot and I'm like, yeah, it's a nice car. Oh my gosh, it drives well. I like what the mileage is. It's got a good record. Yeah. I like this car. And when we got back to the town, a small town where we live, I saw Ford Escapes everywhere. Yeah. Meaning they were already there. I just never noticed them. Until I knew what to look for. So, a lot of this paranormal stuff could be that as well. We didn't know what to see until we knew it. It reminds me, did you ever read any Douglas Adams, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy?
No, I didn't. I never read the book.
Okay. And in one of his later Hitchhiker Guide books, I think maybe the fifth one in his trilogy, that's part of the joke. He, wrote about an alien landing a spaceship right in a really populated area. And the human he was there to get said, aren't you worried about people seeing the spaceship? And the alien said, no, this is somebody else's problem. Humans will see something out of the ordinary, but their minds will immediately reject it because somebody else will see it and do something about it. It's their problem. It's not mine. Which... that really, I think, happens a lot.
I think that does happen. I agree with you. Now, in your opinion, and as far as cryptids go, let's put it that way, do you think people are actually witnessing indigenous creatures, or are these possible corporeal cryptids that are finding their way on Earth plane?
It really depends. It really depends on the creature. When it comes to Bigfoot, I've read a lot and I've listened to a lot of people, and I've had discussions with people who are convinced that Bigfoot is an interdimensional being and they pop in and pop out of dimensions. I've talked to people who are certain, because of all the Bigfoot sightings that it correspond with, UFO sightings, that something's there. I'm the type of person that is more, I think Bigfoot, if he exists, and like I said, I think he really very well could, it is more of a flesh and blood thing. Because it leaves physical traces. It leaves footprints, deep footprints with dermal ridges, which that really excites me. It will leave scat and blood and hair. There are people who claim to have taken a shot at it, and some who claim to have shot it. I really do think that Bigfoot is real. Real as in corporeal. It's flesh and blood. But how does it disappear?
Well, that's just it. That's why, I had my encounter. I had no doubt that this thing was flesh and blood. But I also have heard too many, let's put it that way, too many cases where these things just suddenly disappear or just manifest in front of somebody. Are these corporeal beings that come from another dimension or universe where they come through some type of portal of some type? I don't know. I mean, this thing with what happened in Chicago with these winged humanoids, we have had 2 reports out of all the reports where these beings would suddenly disappear, just like it went through a doorway and just vanish. So,
yeah, but that's different from Bigfoot. Bigfoot, for one, if anybody spent time in the woods, especially thick woods, there have been plenty of times to where I have been within a couple of feet of a deer, and I didn't know it until they got spooked and took off.
Right.
And deer aren't small animals. I mean, they're not Bigfoot size, of course, but they're not small animals. I didn't see it. And what other animals are within 10 feet of me, and I have no clue they're there? Same could be, it could be, with Bigfoot. It's just not only does the color in the hair would make it easy to blend in with the foliage, even though it's so big, it's from all accounts pretty intelligent.
Well, my theory on Bigfoot is that I do believe that there are indigenous Bigfoot. In other words, these are Bigfoot that are flesh and blood, live on this earth in certain areas like the Pacific Northwest, possibly down in Florida, some parts of the Deep South. But I do believe, for the most part, what people are seeing, like where I live at here in Pennsylvania and in the upper Midwest and such, I think, I really believe sincerely that these are some type of other being. These are beings that are coming from another reality into our reality.
And that's definitely that definitely could be. I'm hesitant.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from.
There. Yeah. Because that's explaining an unknown with another unknown. Because
right.
Yeah, mathematically and scientists have said yes, there are other dimensions. There definitely are. Quantum mechanics have shown that, but that's math, and we don't know 100% for sure that that's right. But when you break it down, given the fact that Bigfoot just disappears sometimes and then reappears, or sometimes the footprints it's definitely leaving all of a sudden just stop.
Yeah, that's another thing.
Where'd it go? Where did this thing go?
That's interesting, because the late great J.C. Johnson, he and I were friends, and he would tell me, I'd be tracking this Bigfoot, and all of a sudden it looked like the thing sprouted wings and took off because the footprints just ended. It's and that's happened, and I've heard that from other people as well. So, how do you explain that phenomena?
That if this thing is 8 feet tall and weighs, 600 pounds, it didn't jump.
No. No.
So, right. Yeah. Like I said, I in my opinion, it's flesh and blood animal, but there are so many problems with that. Just what we just talked about that don't really fit in with this is flesh and blood and indigenous.
Mm-hmm.
But then we have, the stories, Native American stories and, First Nation stories from up in Canada of the indigenous people here they didn't consider them animals for the most part. They were just another tribe of people, big hairy people. And although sometimes the Bigfoot would, steal a kid or a woman or a man, and, probably eat them, they traded with them as well. So and here's something that's been bouncing around my head recently. And it's not just, man, I'm gonna throw aliens in here too for a second if you'll
go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. All right. We have the DNA evidence that Dr. Melba Ketchum got analyzed, and it came back human with some anomalies. There was a researcher in Alberta, Canada, who had some DNA blood and hair that he had, that he was pretty sure. No, he was positive this was from a Sasquatch, but it came back after the DNA sequencing. It was human, but with an anomaly. There's a British professor that, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago met with Zena's descendants. Zena was in Russia, a distant village captured an Alma, which is the Russian Bigfoot. And she was a wild woman, all covered in hair, and some of the men in town had sex with her and produced offspring. And those offspring, could talk, weren't quite as hairy. They had large brow ridges, which was interesting, but they continued to have offspring. And this scientist tracked them down and analyzed their DNA, and it was human, but there were some anomalies. And I mentioned aliens, and I'll just go to one spot. The Star Child.
Right.
Was it Lloyd Pye, right?
Lloyd Pye, right.
Lloyd Pye. He had that DNA analyzed, and it came back human with some anomalies. So that made me wondering, okay, instead of all this stuff being human, as in us walking around right now on this planet, what if these DNA samples did come from Bigfoot? What if the Star Child was alien? But you know what? We're all one big human family. Maybe that's why the DNA keeps coming back as human, because they are. I mean, 2 legs, 2 arms, neck, head, 2 eyes, a nostril with 2, or a nose with 2 nostrils, a mouth. All of that those are all human, structural attributes. Why couldn't they all be human?
Well, they could be. I mean, you hear this this term that gets bounced around genetics, junk DNA. Well, maybe that junk DNA is the DNA that we just don't understand what it is.
Right, exactly. I mean, that could be the anomalous DNA in all of us.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, you keep hearing about the missing link. Well, I do believe in evolution for the most part, but I think there was an intervention somewhere down the line. It just seems to me impossible not to believe that there was intervention somewhere down the line.
It's a fascinating idea.
Yes, it is. It's hard to explain. I mean, it's, you can think about it and drive yourself crazy sometimes, but I think about it a lot. I really do, and I agree with you. I mean, there are possibilities. Maybe now we can't explain it, but who's to say one of these days somebody isn't going to figure it out?
Right, and this is, I mean, looking back at science from 150 years ago, the things that they thought and the things that they believed and they were sure that was the truth is laughable in a lot of cases. Well, in 150 years from now, all these things that we're telling people that are the truth are going to be laughable to the people in the future. So all of the reasons that and again, I love science, but all the reasons that science is telling us that Bigfoot can't exist and the chupacabra can't exist and the thylacines definitely dead, and all of this is probably going to be laughable at some point.
Maybe 150 years from now, they'll dig up the old podcast and say, "Hey, they were actually right about
They were right." Yes. Man, Offutt and Strickler knew what they were talking about.
Now, since you're a resident of Missouri, and that you write a lot about your state's strange anomalies, I have to tell you that the underground reptilian encounter at Carthage probably creeps me out more than anything else.
Oh yeah, I know. I agree. That is, that's a terrific story. Some guys were writing, because there was a whole lot of coal mining down there, and there are a lot of abandoned mines.
Right.
Actually, I can't remember the name of the serial killer, but he went. People called him Mad Dog. It was made his story was made into the movie The Hitchhiker. back in 1950 something. Anyway, he used those caves too to dump bodies.
Yeah.
But yeah, some guys were, riding four-wheelers down there, and they came to a part of the cave that, people had, like built into a tunnel, a tunnel with concrete. And yeah, then they encountered a reptilian down there. That's, scares the hell out of me.
Yeah, there were a lot of different offshoots of that thing and a lot of connotations about it. I had some guy tell me one time that he had actually been on an underground river in that area, and he came across these reptilians as well. I don't know what to believe as far as that concerned, but that was one of the craziest stories that ever came out of Missouri. But there is another phenomenon, another story in Missouri that maybe you can tell the listeners about, and that is the butterfly people of Joplin.
Right. When Joplin had its tornado back in 2011, I think. I think it was an F4. It might have been an F5. It tore Joplin up. The pictures are heartbreaking. But I think only like 150 people died, which, given the destruction, was pretty amazing. But there came, after, the rescues were happening. People were pulled out of rubble. The hospitals were filling up, and everything, people were getting time to breathe and start talking. There were a lot of children who started talking about the butterfly people. And it'd be cases like, there was one case, a mom was driving, and her child was like 4 years old, strapped in the car seat in the back seat. And she was trying to get away, and the car started moving in a way that she hadn't anticipated. And she thought that, the tornadoes grabbed me, we're dead. Mm-hmm. But the car was moved out of the path of the tornado. And, the mom was like, oh my God, thank you God for this. And, when she started talking to her kid about, are you okay? The child said, yes, I'm fine because of the butterfly people. That the kids said that people with butterfly wings had picked up the back of the car and moved the vehicle out of the way of the tornado. There was another case of a dad running with his child and about ready to dive in a ditch, and this huge piece of a building was thrown and should have crushed them, but how they landed. And how the part of the building that landed on top of them, it landed in a way to where it didn't crush them. And the child said that he had seen a person with butterfly wings holding on to the part of the building and setting it down softly instead of letting it crash onto them. And there were a lot of other cases, very similar to that.
It's a fascinating story. I mean, you want to believe that, well, maybe they saw angels, or maybe these were large fairies of some type. I don't know what to equate it to. I'm always been interested in winged beings, winged humanoids, but the fact that kids were seeing these things and that they had come to the rescues of other people and tried to help people avoid disaster. It's such a strange story. And quite frankly, I can't really think of any other story even that equates to that.
Right. No, with butterfly people, I can't either. And I did some looking for it as well. And I couldn't see anything that equated to that. But it was just the kids. The kids were the only people who saw it. Yeah. Adults did not see it. Which also, makes sense because, kids report seeing ghosts. They report seeing, shadow people more than adults do. And they report seeing a lot of weird things more than adults do. And, I really seriously think that children see things that we can't.
Oh, yeah, I believe that. I mean, I've done so many paranormal investigations where the kid just tells you, I saw this, I saw that, and it leaves you dumbfounded, but they aren't lying to you. They saw something and they reacted to it somehow. And yeah, I mean, I guess it's the unadulterated mind of a child that it sees something and something's not telling it that you aren't seeing this.
Right. And I don't know if is it something in the eye that changes over time? Is it something in the brain that changes over time? Or is it just the fact that over time people, children get it beaten in their head that ghosts don't exist?
Yeah.
It could be, it could be all the above or any of the above. That's why when my children tell me things, I like to believe them. But let me give you a quick example of that. My wife and I were looking to move to a bigger house because we had a 5-year-old son and a 3-year-old girl, and we only had a 2-bedroom house, and we needed to get enough room to get those two kids away from each other. And every time we'd go into a house, an empty house, brand new house, both kids would go freaking crazy, running around, screaming, exploring, and because it was fun. And we went into this one house that was it was a gorgeous house. I would have loved to live there. It was built in the 1880s. And my 3-year-old said, "Daddy, pick me up." She was fine out in the yard, but as soon as we got in the house, she said, "Pick me up." So I held her, and she just was on me like a leech or a baby possum or something as we walked throughout the entire house. And finally, when we were back down in the living room, I said, "Honey, what's the matter?" And she said, "They're scary." And I said, "Who's scary?" And she whispered, "The ghosts." And by the time we got back out in the yard, she was fine and wanted down and wanted to run around and chase her brother. But she saw something in there that scared her. We didn't get that house, of course.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can understand that. I have had people that, have small kids, and, the parent will be there and the kid's telling them monsters, and they're looking around, they can't see anything, and it causes so much stress on the parent when these kids are scared to death, but they're seeing something.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I listen to kids when they talk about stuff like that. Definitely.
Yes, I do too. Now, does it seem to you that there have been more bizarre eyewitness reports currently being filed? I mean, as opposed to maybe just a few years ago. It just seems to me that there's a lot weirder things going on.
Well, okay, I don't know if there actually are a lot weirder things going on, or the fact that with the proclivity of paranormal shows on TV and how accepted the topics become, is that people feel more comfortable in talking about it.
Well, that may very well be. And, of course, with the internet as well, too.
Yeah, when I wrote my first book on the paranormal, Haunted Missouri, back in, 11 years ago, 2007, I ran into a lot of people who said, "Yeah, there's something going on, but I can't talk about it. People will make fun of me." And by the time I got to the second and third book, everybody was open. So I think that has something to do with it, but I also wouldn't discount the fact that maybe more weird stuff is happening.
Yeah, I know. It just seems to me, and it just seems to me that people are recognizing more bizarre type of phenomena. Now, I can't explain that, but it does seem to be that some of the reports that I receive are something I would have never received several years ago. Why is that? I have no idea.
Okay, well, I mean, again, it could be either one, or it could be a combination of both. Maybe more things are happening, or as I found out, people thought Jason's not going to make fun of me. I've read his work. I know what he's doing. He's going to treat me, he's going to treat me well. And I think that could be it.
That may be it.
Yeah. Or maybe, one of the things that has always amazed me, and it's gotten so much worse, which is counter to what we just talked about, is when people are walking, I observed this in college way back, in 1872, is that if somebody's walking, they might be, they back then they would be, reading or talking to a friend or looking at their feet as they walked with their hands in their pockets. I was always looking straight ahead or up, and people now, as they're walking around, they got their face buried in their phones.
Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm surprised I'm surprised there aren't fewer reports, because people just don't notice any. Hell, people will walk into a street light pole because they're looking at their phone. How are they going to notice a ghost or a UFO walking into a street lamp?
Well, what are your thoughts on the paranormal and the government? I mean, do you believe that they know what's actually is going on, and what do you think they do with that knowledge? And in particular, I'm talking about like Bigfoot.
There have been a lot of stories. There have been. I'm sure you know that. Well, I know you know these stories that. Soldiers in Vietnam reporting Bigfoot, and there was a story about after Mount St. Helens erupted, that soldiers went and took Bigfoot bodies off the mountain. This is going to sound paranoid and conspiratorial, but I am paranoid and conspiratorial. I don't trust the government. Well, I'll just leave it at that. I don't trust the government. When it comes to anything paranormal, I think that they have to know. They have to know.
Yeah, you would think they do. I mean, and I have had experienced. Well, just look at my encounter with the Bigfoot in Sykesville. The fact that 5 minutes after I made the report, there were state police and federal people all over the place. I mean, you never hear of that, but for whatever reason, I believe they were tracking this thing for some reason.
Right, and let's go. I'm sure you're familiar with David Paulides' work.
Right.
Right, and in some of the stories that he's had about the disappearance of kids in parks, national parks, state parks, is like Green Berets were called in. The FBI came in. Those two groups of people don't come in for a missing persons report.
Right.
Right. So what exactly were they looking for?
Well, that's just it. I've heard too many stories of certain departments in the government and in the Pentagon that for some reason, without any explanation, have certain groups go in to eradicate or look for people. But you have people that witness it, but you can't ever get a straight story. But they know something. They
do. And I mean, again, the trust of the government is so limited. The Tuskegee syphilis experiment, our government, used on our own people. I mean, if they can do that, I mean, what else are they doing and trying to keep secret?
Well, I mean, the MK Ultra is a perfect example. Some of the stuff that happened through that program. And, I mean, you would think when they had the Church Commission and they say it stopped. Well, I don't believe that. I don't believe that stuff has stopped. And in fact, it's probably increased to a point where, it's just kept more quiet.
Right. Well, when they say, I mean, after, Project Blue Book closed, the government was done investigating UFOs, right?
Yeah.
And then, when the New York Times, was it last December? Not this last, but a year ago, last December, came out with the story about the government investigating UFOs. I mean, that blew my mind that it actually hit the New York Times. But I mean, the government was lying to us. Of course, they were investigating all this stuff all this time.
Do you think Bigfoot ought to be a protected species?
Well, here.
I know I'm throwing this stuff random at you, but I'm interested in other people's opinions on a lot of this stuff that that I think about.
All right, this is an opinion that people have gotten upset with me before.
Okay.
All right, Bigfoot could be an uncategorized species of North American ape.
Okay.
And if it's that, the population is really small. If Bigfoot is just, as the Native Americans said, was just another species of people, yeah, it'd be nice to know about them, but, let's leave them alone. However, right. I really want to know. So I really wouldn't be opposed to somebody shooting one in the head.
Yeah.
Just one, so we'd know. I mean, that really doesn't feel good in my stomach saying that, because these are obviously, given all of the stories that I've gotten from eyewitnesses and the stories I've read from other people, these are obviously intelligent beings that are probably kin to us. Mm-hmm. And it would be murder to put one down. But damn it, I'm really curious.
Yeah, I am too. And I always thought that, somebody would go out there and pop one of these things, and the body would go to science, and they would figure out that what it is exactly, and that it's not a myth. And then Bigfoot investigation and enthusiasm is moot. All the books that were written about Bigfoot are probably moot by then.
Well, but so what? So what? I mean, look at all the mythical creatures that turned out to be real. Gorillas were mythical creatures. The giant panda was a mythical creature. Wood bison, were a mythical creature, but they're actually real. I mean, I don't have a problem with finding out that Bigfoot's real. The one problem I have with finding out that Bigfoot's real is that, again, they appear to be intelligent. They're bigger than us. They're stronger than us. These guys are going to go on TV and take our entertainment jobs. Mm. Okay, can you imagine these guys on a construction crew?
Oh, that may very well be. I mean, yeah.
Professional.
Look at it like that.
Look at professional Bigfoot wrestling. Actually, I want to see that. That would be great.
Do you or can you share, or have you had any personal paranormal experiences?
I have not had one cryptozoological experience.
Uh-huh.
But I did see a ghost. Okay. I saw a full-bodied apparition. I grew up in a farmhouse that had spent most of its existence. It was 120 years old by the time we moved in. It had spent that time being a 2-room schoolhouse.
Okay.
Actually, my grandma taught there, and my dad went, and his sisters and brother went to school there. But it was turned into a 3-bedroom house, and we moved in there, and I'd always hear creaking, and what sounded like footsteps, and I'd yell for my dad, and he'd come into the room and say, "Damn it, Jason, it's the house settling."
Yeah, okay. That was always the excuse people would give their kids.
Yeah, one afternoon. It was in the winter, and I know it was a Saturday or a Sunday because it was in the middle of the afternoon, and it was really bright. And I walked out of my bedroom and went into this hallway across from my bedroom door, where Dad put bookshelves everywhere, and they were just loaded with books. And I was going to get the World Book Encyclopedia, probably dinosaurs, because I was locked on that. Mm-hmm. And I walk into the hallway, and there's a little boy about 6 years old standing in the hallway staring at me. And yeah, we live 6 miles out in the country. There were no little boys. I was the only little boy out there. Mm-hmm. And we stared at each other for a while. And I remember I can see him in my head right now. He had brown hair parted on the left side. He had a blue flannel shirt and blue jeans. And I could see the bookshelf through this kid. Mm. And I stood there in shock. staring. I have no idea how long I stood there staring at him. It was probably 10 or 15 seconds, something like that. But he blinked. And when he blinked, that broke the shock I was in. And I turned around, walked back into my bedroom, and shut the door.
Mm-hmm.
And I eventually came out, and he was gone, of course. But that made me think, you know what? I just saw a ghost. Saw a ghost in my house. I wasn't really that scared. I was more curious. It was like, okay, so ghosts really do exist. When you die, there's something after it.
Mm-hmm.
I want to find out what's going on. And so that's why when I got old enough, I started researching these subjects.
Well, you wrote Darkness Walks, the Shadow People Among Us, and I read that book many years ago, and I've had clients that have had these shadow people encounters. What do you believe the shadow people are? Because I get all kinds of different explanations from people. I have my own opinions, but what do you think shadow persons are?
I interviewed at least 250 people for the book.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't include all of them because some of them I thought it was a hypnagogic vision.
Mm-hmm.
But I included a whole lot. I came to the conclusion that shadow people are probably a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
That just look the same. Shadow people are human, blacker than night, human-shaped shadows. Generally, they appear two-dimensional. Some of them just walk through a person's life, not paying attention, never noticing the person, never noticing the person who sees them. Then there are those that notice the person watching them, get scared, and run away. Then there are shadow people that seem to observe
Mm-hmm.
people watching them. And then there are shadows with red eyes that terrify those who see them. And they report that it feels like they're feeding off the fear that they generate.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's the Hat Man, which is a shadow person wearing a fedora, which stalks people, and it also tends to generate fear. All of these things only have one thing in common, and it's their appearance. They're black, they're human shaped, and that's it. You can't see any features on them at all. Some of the behavior seems like a residual ghost. If somebody sees a shadow person, every once in a while does the same thing, walks down the stairs, takes a left, goes into the kitchen, and disappears. That's definitely sounds like a residual ghost. The ones that walk through somebody's life, their living room, their backyard, whatever, and doesn't take notice, that seems like somebody's going from place to place.
Yeah.
Maybe it's somebody, maybe this is a window area, and it's just another human being walking from place to place, and all we can see is the shadow, or most of it. I interviewed an exorcist, a Catholic exorcist. I interviewed an expert in Islam, an expert in Buddhism, Hinduism, a Native American shaman. For all of these, except for the Buddhist expert I interviewed, these all have negative connotations. They're a demonic type being that's only meaning us harm. So, I've also a couple of people told me they're convinced shadow people are extraterrestrials, but what isn't. But so yeah, to answer your question, I think they're more than one thing.
Yeah, though that's probably true. I mean, I haven't been able to pinpoint or really get a good read on myself. I know it seems that they do show up in dysfunctional situations a lot of times, or where there's sickness, or they're weak people that are weak or whatever. You're right, they do seem to feed off of that type of energy.
Well, and that's one type. And I had, when I was younger, I saw some shadow beings, and they just walked through my room. That's all they did. Took no notice of me. And this happened for a few month period, but eventually they stopped. And I was scared because it was like, what the hell is that? but it wasn't the type of fear that it felt like the entity was generating just to feed off of.
Mm-hmm.
I was just scared. So I think, there are definitely different types.
So what's in the future for Jason Offutt? I know you have a new book coming up. What else is going on?
Well, I've got a novel that I just finished. That's what else I do. I write novels. It's in my hands of my beta readers right now, so I don't even know if it's any good or not. But when it comes to anything on the paranormal bent, I'm working on chasing Canada's monsters.
Mm. Yeah, I know you've been writing a series of stories or articles over at Mysterious Universe for several years now. So, and yeah, I know the last several have been about Canada. So, yeah, that'll be very interesting.
Yeah,
and I have heard that you are a home beer brewer as well.
Yes, I am.
Any thoughts about going commercial?
Well, no, because I can't get it right every single time.
Yeah, I think consistency is a big part of that.
Oh man, because I will brew. I brewed 2 batches back to back. One I brewed in a way that was really difficult to do, and I thought it was going to be awful, and it was delicious. And another batch that I'd brewed before that I knew was going to be good tasted terrible. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Jason, thanks again for being on the show. I appreciate you coming on, and hope I can get you a little sooner than next time.
Hey, Lon, just anytime you want me on, just let me know. I've had a great time. Wonderful talking to you again.
You take care.
You too.
Now, listeners can show their support for Arcane Radio by becoming a patron. Simply go to phantomsandmonsters.com and click the Podbean patron banner. I want to thank my newest patron, Michelle. Arcane Radio also accepts direct donations. If you have an unexplained encounter or sighting, feel free to contact me through the Phantoms and Monsters blog site. I want to again thank Jason Offutt for joining me this evening, and I want to thank you for listening to the show. Good night and have a great weekend.